Thanks for listening to this Word in Your Ear podcast. If you'd like to get early access to all our productions ad-free, priority booking for our live events, and to take part in our weekly quiz, go to patreon.com/wordinyourear for more details.
You're listening to a podcast from The Word.
I've got a stat wardy for you. It's very straightforward. It's a kind of it's a right or wrong. Mm-hmm. It's not complicated. I noticed the other day there was a horse called Reckless Eric running at Newbury. Mm-hmm. So I thought I'd check out all the other current rock and roll racehorses. And there are certain songs or band names that have that ring about them, don't they? Mm-hmm. And here are 6 nags currently pounding the turf. One of them made up by me, Spot the Ringer. Okay, which of these isn't real? Pyjamarama, Whatever She Brings We Sing, Cigarettes and Alcohol, Crazy Diamond, King Crimson, and Wonderwall.
Wow. 5
of those are actual racehorses currently out there.
Now, you know my normal way of backing horses when I go to the races very occasionally.
Yeah, you just put money on anything that's got a rock and roll connection.
Absolutely. And I go with a couple of blokes who have all the form books and everything, and I just pick something that reminds me of the Allman Brothers, and I'm very often right. But in that little list, I'm just going to take a wild stab because I haven't a clue. Cigarettes and Alcohol.
Cigarettes and Alcohol ran at Utoxeter.
Wow.
At 28-1 very recently.
Right, I'm going to have a second guess. Pyjamarama.
Pyjamarama came second at Newbury not very long ago.
I'm going to a third guess. King Crimson.
King Crimson raced Catterick in 2022.
I can't remember the other ones.
Crazy Diamond won at Kelso not long ago. Wonderwall was at Kempton Park on January the 24th this year. No, the ringer is Whatever She Brings We Sing. Because it's just too long to say, isn't it? And coming up on the stand sign, Whatever She Brings We Sing.
Yes, you wouldn't get it out.
You wouldn't get it. And she reminded me of the old... do you remember Alan Partridge on the Day-to-Day does that wonderful thing where he commentates on the horses. One of his horses is Sinead O'Connor, which just seems a terribly funny name. Sinead O'Connor, and then is being challenged by Novelty Bubble, Immaculate Pasta, Christ's Chin, and I think the winner was Alf Ramsey's Pawn Dungeon. So there it is. I know.
Good work.
There's a horse called Jethro Tull out there, Gentle Giant, the Midnight Rambler.
Very good.
But there are certain things that I think there should be one called Lovely Rita. That's a good name for a horse.
Surely there has been.
There must be. And Dr. Feelgood also. Just great names.
So if anybody's a student of the turf who's listening to this, let us know whether Lovely Rita is already out there or it's been put out to stud many years ago. We'd be interested. So here we are. Danny Baker sold his records, finally. After years of talking about it, he's actually sold his records.
8,000 albums, isn't it? And he's been kind of teasing this auction by posting pictures of really fabulous things, old acetates still with the original press release and, records that are individually worth hundreds of pounds. So I'd love to know what he got for his 8,000 albums, wouldn't you? We're going to have to ask him. We won't be able to reveal.
Yeah, it's between him and the tax man, I would imagine. I don't know whether to feel envious or not, really. If I sold mine, I'm sure they wouldn't make as much. Well, it certainly wouldn't make as much as Danny's. Because Danny's a very specialised collection because it's pretty much 70s albums, really.
It is, and they're quite rarefied stuff. And also a lot of it's signed, isn't it? So but then again, signed to Danny, which is whether or not that does that take something off the value of the signature if it's signed to somebody else and you own it? I don't know.
I've no idea at all. But I've now got to the point where I can no longer get rid of mine, really. They've, over the last, it's kind of post-lockdown, really. They've sort of become a part of me. I meet people on the street who are so used to seeing me in kind of video casts that we do and so forth, with a whole load of records behind me. that they kind of expect me to go around carrying those on my shoulders, you know,
or have a huge kind of a cardboard cutout behind you, a permanent backdrop.
Yeah, and I would. I feel lost without them, really, genuinely. You know, I mean, it's not that I go and play them every day or anything. I just think, oh my God, if you got
there's something very grounding about it, isn't it? That's there up in the attic.
Well, they've always been there. They were the first, you know, regardless of whether they're musical association, they were the first possession I was ever bothered about. And actually, they've been the only possession I'm really bothered about. You know what I mean? Apart from
not the books.
No, they're not. No, not at all. With books, I mean, if they disappear, I can replace them or whatever. Go and get another one if I want them. You know, having all the Beatles records there, just an example, or the Little Feat records, or Joni Mitchell records, or whatever. It's very different from having all the I don't know, Charles Dickens books or Jane Austen or P.G. Wodehouse or whatever. They don't. That doesn't say anything about you. You know what I mean?
No, it doesn't.
You tended to, and also records have that very different kind of. They're related to a chronology, aren't they? You can remember, generally speaking, you can remember buying them. You know, you can remember acquiring them. You can remember the age you were when you acquired them. So they're kind of a bit of a diary of your life, as well as everything else. And so I've never been bothered about anything else, you know, material, other than records. Not at all. Not for a second. You know.
I was looking through mine yesterday and thinking that the ones I really cared about were the ones I owned actually when I was a teenager. Because those are the ones where you sit there. I was particularly dug out John Barleycorn by Traffic, which came out when I was, 16, I think, 15 or 16. And I can just remember sitting, it's the records that you sat in rooms with your pals and you poured over the sleeve and you probably smoked number 6 and you listened intently in rapt silence often to every single note of those records. And that memory is kind of forged into, it's just welded into even just the tactile sensation of the sleeve, really. And those are the records that I don't know. I could probably part with quite a lot of others because it's just the sleeve you're getting rid of. You can always listen to the music. But those early Beatles EPs, the early Beatles albums, Dylan, my copy of Nice Enough to Eat, which came out when I was 15, was absolute life changer. And again, it's to do with just remembering being teleported back to a room, surrounded by some pals, and listening to that and talking about all the tracks.
But the odd thing, though, is that now that it's 50 years later or whatever it is, these things, regardless of people argue about, you can get hundreds of pounds for that. Well, so what, but it's the kind of the resonance, excuse me, that these things have now is greater than they ever had in the past. People used to envy people's album collections back in the day, but they didn't sit around thinking about them in the way that they do nowadays. You look at how people post pictures of album covers on
record
social
now
media.
Playing,
all that stuff. That's a whole kind of new dimension.
The message there is often, I've got this and you haven't.
Well, I suppose so. Yeah, there's a certain amount of that to it, and it's just, I suppose, it's just so much of our lives nowadays is on screens. Here's a classic example of we're doing it now. Whereas anything that's in the real world has immense kind of pull to you nowadays. And actually, we were just talking about, we ought to talk about it now, actually, that wonderful thing that Robert Plant last night
it's beautiful.
Posted on Twitter. Because he's got some shows coming up. He says, new shows.
Shall I read out?
He says, I've found my first self-made poster from 60 years ago. And he's got a wonderful, he's obviously done it in his bedroom with, whatever drawing materials he had to hand to advertise his upcoming gig with a
It looks
group.
as though it's a piece of paper. It looks like it's been stained with tea to make it look old, like an old pirate treasure map. But it's written on it. It's handwritten. It says, "You like Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, Howlin' Wolf, Jimmy Reed? If so, you want R&B, the Blacksnake Moan," which is the name of the band. The weirdest, spelt wrong, wildest sound in R&B. You want proof? That's good. You want proof? Yeah. See them soon. Phone Hal 2516. This is in Stourbridge, isn't it? Inquiries. Phone Stourbridge 1932. It's fantastic. It's so sweet. And
it's brilliant that he's kept that, and it's brilliant that he shared it with people as well. Because
he would have been about 14 or 15.
14, 15.
64, yeah.
And it's a reminder that, all these superstars, they all started off when they were 14, 15, didn't they?
Yeah.
And they all started off doing things like that, drawing things on the back of school exercise books, no access to special materials or anything of that kind of. It's just the beautiful naivety of it is really, really affecting. It's fantastic to see it. We'll try and post a link to it.
Also, the idea of a 14-year-old boy as some kind of evangelist for R&B and blues.
Well, which they kind of were.
Well,
they kind of were. You see, I was that generation. Not far off the same age, and that was the thing. Apart from the Beatles, you then had to decide what were you into. Oh, you were into R&B. And if people wanted to know what R&B was, this is quite interesting because R&B is a term that's changed its meaning regularly over the last 40, 50 years and will no doubt continue changing its meaning. But at the time, what it meant was, as he says here at the top, Muddy Waters, Sonny Boy Williamson, Howlin' Wolf, and Jimmy Reed. It meant things on the chest label. It meant electrified country blues is what it meant. It meant the kind of things that were covered on the first Rolling Stones album. And that was the sort of stuff that you were into, and there were loads of groups who played that kind of stuff. I tell you another thing, while we're talking about this, this kind of early lives of rock superstars, we should note the passing at the age of, I think, 98 of Adele Springsteen, Bruce Springsteen's mother. He'd been obviously a huge figure in his life, but in his career.
But particularly because he didn't have a lot of tension with his dad.
Well, this is the really interesting thing, and it really becomes clear if you read his autobiography, which is very good.
It's really good.
That clearly there were two personalities clearly in his home when he was growing up. His mother was Italian, gregarious, outgoing, sociable, loved to go to work and so forth. And his father, who was Dutch-Irish, I think, and, morose, didn't like work. He didn't get on with people, you know what I mean? A loner, probably drank too much and was given to depression. And it's really interesting.
And he has elements of both.
He had elements of both.
Yeah.
And I think the more aware he got of it as he got older, the more he must have thought, I am these two people. You can detect that kind of duality in his music. That there is, this fantastically outgoing party side of him. And then there's this utterly morose sitting in the kitchen in the dark in the middle of the night side of Bruce Springsteen, which is, and there's nothing in between. There's very few
ruminating
things. Yeah. And he must have thought,
self-doubting.
I could go that way. You know what I mean? He was thought, that's in me, Whereas she was a very different person. She'd been suffering with Alzheimer's for the last 10 years, so she hadn't been as much in evidence as she previously had been. She used to regular feature popping up to dance with him on, Dancing in the Dark or whatever in front of a large crowd. She kind of liked the attention, and nothing wrong with that at all.
Absolutely. Well, she was just really proud. She loved being identified as his mum.
Absolutely.
Talking to fans, why not?
Absolutely no reason why not.
I think one of the loveliest things about being a successful musician, having a parent live that long, is they've got to see you succeed. Because the whole tension of that is for a lot of them is the parents' constant worry that you're not going to make it, or their vigorous resistance to the idea of you doing it in the first place. In fact, a lot of people are very driven by the fact that they wanted to prove their parents wrong and they wanted to succeed. Gave them some kind of momentum. But it's a lovely thing to think you would be there to see the fruits of that success and possibly be bought the kind of the seaside bungalow. It was always buy an old place for the parents, wasn't it? Like Lennon with Aunt Mimi.
He wrote a wonderful song about her called "The Wish," which is, I think, is on Tracks or something.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Which is just a wonderful, sentimental song about his mother and about how she'd bought him his first guitar. And then I think the last verse is, last night we sat around laughing about all the things that guitar bought us. Which is a wonderful idea.
Line. It says, well, it was me in my Beatle boots and you in pink curlers and matador pants, pulling me up off the couch to do the twist for my uncles and aunts.
And listen, and I can remember doing that, what I mean?
Yeah.
And my mother never had Toreador pants or whatever.
Yeah.
But when the twist was happening, whatever, it's only 61, 62, you'd get family would come round. And they'd have a couple of drinks, and then you would be called out your bedroom to demonstrate the twist.
We were too.
To your Uncle Tom.
Me and my three sisters, yeah. The whole idea of the twist was you were stubbing out a cigarette with your right toe while drying your back with a towel.
A towel, absolutely.
And if you did it like that, you were doing the twist. It was fantastic.
Yeah.
A dance anyone could do.
Yeah.
There was something very affecting about rock stars and parents. Do you remember that series that John Olsen's pictures in Life magazine in 1970?
Oh, yeah.
It's wonderful of Elton John with his parents and...
but no, his mother. His mother and his stepfather, isn't it?
Mum and stepdad, that's right.
Yeah.
Crosby, Zappa, Grace Slick, Eric Clapton with his grandma. It's very, very affecting.
Ginger Baker with his mother.
Yes, Ginger Baker missing a tooth. It's fantastic.
Because... And other interesting reflections on rock stars and mothers is both McCartney and Lennon lost theirs.
Yeah.
Around about the same age, didn't they? Is that right?
Yes, they were. McCartney was 14, I think, and I think Lennon was just 17. That was one of the bonding things that they had between them, wasn't it?
And you see, we've had this conversation in the past that rock stars, underneath it all, who do they do it for? They do it for their mothers, don't they? It's a huge driving force, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you want your mother to think you've done well, but you can't impress your mother because she's your mother, for goodness sake. She's dealt with you when you had nothing to impress anybody with, apart from the fact you were their child, you know what I mean? And I noticed that when Bob Dylan got the Kennedy Center Honors, which are the kind of MBE equivalent, isn't it? The American artists, not just American artists, actually. I think Led Zeppelin got it and so forth. There's a very grand ceremony is it in Washington? I don't know. And very often the president is there, or the great and the good. And there's Bob Dylan, and they put them in a kind of box where they sit there in the audience and watch people paying tribute to them doing their songs and so forth. So there's Bob Dylan with his kind of bow tie and his medal around him and so forth. Who's the person he's got sitting next to him? His mother.
Fantastic.
His mother, B.T. Zimmerman, who was, I think, 83 at the time,
right.
or something like that. And that is a classic case of, I'm going to bring my mother along to see to prove what I made of myself. You know what I mean? And he must have done that.
It really is. It is a deliberate thing, isn't it? Because that's the kind of proof, that you can say all you like, but the idea that you're being recognised by the establishment, is the language that parents can understand. I told you before about my dad. My dad never kind of understood what it was I was doing. in kind of music journalism and magazines because he didn't read them and he didn't really understand them, And he kept saying, when are you going to do something? When are you going to get a proper job? And then I was interviewed in the Times around the time of the launch of Q, and that was the changing point. Because I was in the Times, the Times was saying, this is a really good magazine, it's really interesting, we're talking to the editor. He recognised the fact that I must be doing something significant. I was really touched by that.
Yeah. There's a very good clip, which you can probably find on YouTube, of Springsteen, must have been 10 years ago. They, Ellis Island, which is the island in New York, where a lot of immigrants were in the turn of the last century, were processed and so forth. They have some kind of awards that they give to notable immigrants or whatever, or children of immigrants. And there is a ceremony where Bruce Springsteen is talking about his mother, and his mother's there, and her two sisters, and so the three Italian sisters, and they're all now in their 70s or 80s or whatever at the time of doing it, and just talking about them in front of a crowd. And to be able to, that's one of the benefits of your enormous success, is you can treat your mother and your two aunts to the full glare of publicity for a day. That's a wonderful gift to give people, isn't it?
It is.
It's there. I'm sure it's there if you.
I always thought with the Beatles that actually not having mothers was, in some respects, liberating.
Yeah.
I don't think John Lennon would have done some of the things he did if he'd had a mother, who had a close relationship with, whose opinion he respected. Would he have gone on television in a bag? Would he have planted acorns for peace? Would he have done and said? Would he have had bed-ins? And I think his mother would have just tapped him on the shoulder and say, "You look ridiculous. Don't do that."
It was funny when I interviewed Neil and Chris, Pet Shop Boys, a few months ago for Radio Times, and we were talking about they did the London Palladium show. It was revived at some point by ITV, I think, and they were on that show, and it was supposed to finish with a carousel with them all going round, as the Sunday night at London Palladium show had traditionally done, that everybody went round waving at the crowd. And Pet Shop Boys decided they weren't going to do this because, as they said, we don't do waving, Yeah. Of course, who was there on the night and who really took umbrage? Mrs. Tennant and Mrs. Lowe. They were both there. How can you not go down roundabout? Come on, I'll clip you around the ear.
Absolutely.
They were too late.
Go and tidy your room. Go with no supper.
Yeah.
I remember Neil saying, telling me once he'd gone on, I think Pet Shop Boys were playing Wembley Arena. They had a very elaborate dance routine, suggestive with dancers suggesting adventurous sexual acts, and he said he was incredibly embarrassed to think that his mother was in the audience. And you would be, wouldn't you?
Of course you would.
It really cramp your style. I think you'd just be so self-conscious because they.
Because if you go in, if you go in a venue, there's 10,000 people in there, and two of those 10,000 people are the performer and the performer's mother. Nobody else in that place matters at all because that's the intense relationship going on.
It is. It is.
Because they're the two people who are thinking most deeply about what's happening. You know what I mean? Everybody else is just a spectator. So there you go. Adele Springsteen, 98. Good evening.
You're listening to the Word Podcast, where the time is whenever you want it to be.
The Taylor Swift phenomenon, I can't remember the last time anyone was this big, if you like. Here's a few things, right? Her and Travis Kelce, who David Letterman, amusingly, in a little clip the other day, she was saying I was amazed that she was going out with Kelsey Grammer. And people were saying, no, it's Travis Kelce, the Kansas City Chiefs American football star. But anyway, her and Travis Kelce caught up, aren't they, in this extraordinary kind of, headlines like far-right influencers claim the singer is a Pentagon asset conspiring to manipulate voters after a rigged Super Bowl favours the Kansas City Chiefs. The scale of this, the idea that she is somehow involved in the rigging of a Super Bowl game and also a crucial pawn that could swing an election. And there's been a threat from Donald Trump's election team to wage a holy war against her if she publicly backs Biden. She's leading in all the Grammy nominations. She is still in the middle of the most profitable tour of all time, which is, affecting local economies. Her music film has broken all box office records. She's re-recorded her catalogue. There's the whole AI deep fake, the horrible story. She is the obvious target because she's so kind of ubiquitous. She has 279 million Instagram followers. She's had the most weeks at number one. And now there's that big row, isn't there? She's so huge that United Music Group have taken her off TikTok. And caught
I don't think that's just her.
No, it's not just her.
Universal are involved in a face-off with TikTok.
Yeah.
They've withdrawn all their music until they get the money they think they should get. But anyway, carry on.
And there's just one more thing, which is, I'm sure you know about this. There's a book called Argylle being published at the moment by Bantam. And it's
a film. It's a film.
It's a spy movie. It's been made based on the book. And the book is by somebody called Ellie Conway. Now, Ellie Conway is something that doesn't appear to exist. Ellie Conway is actually was the name of a character from Neighbours back in the day. There is a character in the film called Ellie Conway who is played by somebody who looks extraordinarily like Taylor Swift, but no one knows who the author is, which is a brilliant piece of marketing by Bantam. But of course, the current consensus is that this person must be Taylor Swift. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous, but it made me think that she is so utterly universal. I mean, there are times when there are people. I mean, there was a time when Boy George was the most famous pop star on the planet. Not a very long period of time, but he was the most famous. But he wasn't the biggest. She is not only the most famous, but clearly by some margin the biggest. Can you think of the last time there was anybody like that? I mean, Madonna was huge, but there was also Michael Jackson at the time.
Yeah, I don't know really. I mean, it's very difficult to say because the nature of fame has changed so much.
Yeah,
in the 21st century, really, in the time of Taylor Swift, that it's very difficult to measure those kind of things. The thing I find extraordinary about Taylor Swift is she is everything you say in terms of popularity and ubiquitousness and power and so forth. If you played me a record right now, I wouldn't recognize it. Now that obviously partly indicates I'm old and out of touch, but it also indicates the fact that media works in a totally different way nowadays. And so when Madonna was huge, whether you liked Madonna or not, you heard Madonna.
Yeah, you did.
You knew what Madonna was. The same thing doesn't apply nowadays.
Well, then again, you were listening to pop radio, and so you wouldn't be able to escape.
No, but my mother would probably have.
I
don't know. Because everybody watched certain television programs. Well, there's 20 million people watched Top of the Pops, and so they weren't all watching it because they liked it. They were watching it because they wanted to know what was happening.
Yeah.
Whereas there is nothing like that nowadays. If you like Taylor Swift, you can live in a Taylor Swift world 24/7, no difficulty at all. If you're not particularly bothered, you need never encounter her, at all, and that's utterly changed in nature. It seems to me, in the way these things work, and I think a lot of this. A lot of this business, I don't know, the Republican Party and so forth, and newspapers running outlandish headlines about Taylor Swift, is a desperate attempt to try and ride the coattails of this, of the fame that they know she has.
Oh yeah, it's like business pages in newspapers. The number of times they will put a picture of Taylor Swift in to link it tenuously to some business story.
Well,
it's a way of getting people's attention, and it's just it's an arresting image.
Yeah, well, it's always been the case on business pages. Talk to anybody who works on the business pages, they always say, EMI or any public company in the music space that published its results gave them an opportunity to run a picture of a glamorous pop star rather than a bloke in a suit and tie.
Absolutely.
Which is what on a fire escape, which is what they're doing most of the time. But I don't know. It's like Madonna is the obvious forerunner. But something like when Beyonce's got a record out, Beyonce is absolutely ubiquitous and clear. Beyonce.
She's ubiquitous, but I don't imagine she's got that kind of reach. I mean,
okay, but Madonna, let's just get it right. Didn't Beyonce play how many Tottenham Hotspur stadiums before the late summer? 5 or 6?
Yes, there was some.
It's just absolutely incredible, Because here's the thing, Mark. Back in the day, nobody used to be that big. Nobody. If you go back and you look at the times when you think, I don't know, the Rolling Stones or David Bowie or whoever.
No, they were big in a contained world.
They were
a world bordered by the music press and occasionally breaking out into the news headlines or whatever. But they wouldn't. Much more restricted world.
Nobody played 5 stadiums back in those days, did they? No, they just didn't do it at all. And that was when those prices were relatively cheap.
Yeah.
Now it's 150 quid and more.
And there are people in the remotest parts of the world thinking about Taylor Swift because they can be in touch with her Instagram.
It's social media, isn't it?
It is completely.
It's George Best was an enormously popular footballer, but go and look at Ronaldo's Instagram followers, and it's on a totally different scale, isn't it?
Yeah.
So whoever comes along next will be bigger than Taylor Swift. Because it'll be they'll have to be. There's a kind of inflationary effect.
Expanded structure.
It sort of has to be.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
It does. Yeah.
Because also, the thing about social media with music is I think it encourages people to advertise their loyalties. And they can advertise loyalties that are very often not very strong. You put your hand up, say, yeah, I like that person or that group or that singer or whatever. And so the next one, that's my prediction. The next Taylor Swift will be bigger
than Taylor Swift.
The Word Podcast, prime cuts of popular culture served fresh each week.
I had a wonderful example of how music finds me nowadays. There's been a lot of complaints over the last few weeks, about the kind of death of rock criticism and all that kind of thing, and how there ought to be some kind of system for agreeing about music. I don't know how much I believe in that, but anyway, last Friday night, I think it was, after we'd finished doing the traditional Friday evening quiz with our Patreon supporters. And if you haven't joined us for that, why don't you make a point to do that in the near future? Anyway, I was just
Friday night, 6 o'clock.
Friday night, 6 o'clock. Everybody welcome. Hurry. And I was just checking Twitter, and Ben Watt posted something about a record by 2 artists I've never heard of, and just said, this is absolutely brilliant, this record. You should listen to it. And it's called The Room by Fabiano di Nascimento and Sam, I think I'm pronouncing this right, Gendel. And so because we're in the year 2024 and because there's a thing called Spotify, I was able to do that. I didn't have to write a note to myself thinking next time you're in a record shop that's big enough to stock millions of things, go and see if you can find that, because even if you went to Rough Trade East or whatever, somewhere really big, Mark, where would you go and look for Fabiano di Nascimento and Sam Gendel?
God, no, so you'd have to look in a section, wouldn't you?
You probably would.
And you'd have to find someone behind a counter who knew what you were talking about,
which is a tall order, even with the best will in the world. Whereas that's the old world where we would have had to do it that way. In the new world, I just go The Room, and I was listening to it, playing through a speaker downstairs. It's fantastic. It's really good.
What's it sound like?
It's Fabiano.
Now as a rock critic, you've got to describe the music.
Yeah, well, it's not rock for a start.
No.
It's Fabiano and Nascimento is a Brazilian guitarist, acoustic guitarist, and Sam Gendel is, I think, an American Californian saxophonist, and they're improvising around some, I think, Brazilian folk tunes, old tunes. But it's a lovely, lovely record. And it's the kind of record, I just wanted to mention it because it's the kind of record I found myself listening to an increasing amount of and thinking to myself, there must be more of a market for this stuff than there ever was in the past, thanks to streaming and thanks to Spotify and Apple Music and Amazon Music and all the other ways of finding music. Because it tends to be instrumental. And it tends to be the kind of stuff you can just put on any time of the day.
But isn't that the big evolving market, isn't it? Because, it's for people wanting stuff to work to that isn't distracting. It's just a background, as background music, basically.
Well, it's better than that because, but you could use it as background music. There's no doubt about it at all. But I think there's a lot of that kind of ethereal kind of, I think music that if it was ever marketed in a traditional way, they would describe it as being kind of healing in its properties.
Yes,
it soothes, the raveled sleeve of care, all that kind of thing. I do find myself listening to it, but I just thought people moan about the streaming services. No, what a shame we haven't got the traditional, the old solid album, you knew where you were, all that kind of stuff. But just, in the words of Joni Mitchell, something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. You know what I mean?
Yes.
And the simple accessibility of this stuff is a fantastic gift. You know what I mean? The fact that you can find this stuff. You never used to be able to find the stuff at all. You might enjoy the hunt, but very often the hunt didn't have a satisfactory conclusion.
But I think we take that completely for granted, because the idea now that you look for that track, The Room, and couldn't find it. If you couldn't find it, you'd be absolutely furious and mortified. You'd think there must be some kind of mistake. You just assume that everything is there, which it mostly is.
It is.
We are incredibly lucky.
We are. And I'm just referring here to a piece of correspondence that came in a couple of weeks ago from here. I think you're going to have to forgive me if I don't pronounce this correctly, but I think it's Andy Shea. And it was drawing our attention to the Beach Boys are touting a Beach Boys focus playlist. He says they're jumping on I think it's he. Forgive me if I'm wrong. They're jumping on the streaming work from home, work with headphones, ambient trend. And he says, as the literal commodification of music keeps happening, I wonder if more of this is coming. And it's quite interesting if you go and look at this Beach Boys thing, because it's all, lots of it's kind of offcuts and outtakes from, I don't know, Friends or late 60s Beach Boys albums put together in a way that you can put these things together on Spotify, so there's bits of backing vocal, there's bits of rhythm track or whatever, and you put it together in a way that it just sounds very seductive, and very, very kind of warm and healing. Again, it's that same thing. And I was reading the what do they say on the kind of the press release for it? How lucky for us now that so much astounding, fascinating, and breathtaking sound has been relinquished over the past dozen years. The sounds unearthed showcase both backing and vocal tracks that, when presented apart from the rest of the master, create separate, timeless, special art. Vocal lines that were buried, a rhythm, a beat, a guitar harmony line pulled away from itself only shows how much music was actually in all this music. Every passage is a gift. So basically,
that's meant to set you speeding to listen to it.
Well, but I did listen to it, and I've listened to it a couple of times, and it's very good. It's fine. But I just thought it's really interesting that well, of course they've just put out this Band on the Run, haven't they? 50th anniversary with the demixed version. Have you heard any of this?
No, I haven't.
And I was listening to the demixed Jet last night, which is just a kind of raw version of Jet, really. And I'm kind of surprised.
So what does that mean, demixed?
I don't exactly know, Mark. I don't know. I just happened to listen to it, and it sounds like a rough mix, basically, to me. It hasn't got all the kind of sugar coating on it, and and his vocals are a little bit all over the place. Which I give him points for putting this out. He's not hiding anything at all, and I did quite enjoy it. I wouldn't necessarily want to listen to it 20 times, I'll go back and listen to the original.
Does it sound radically different from the original?
Well, go on, Mark. Why are you asking me? Are you asking me because I'm a rock critic? even though, as I often point out to people when they ring me up and say, we thought you'd ask you because you're a rock critic. I said, I haven't criticised any rock in years. Why are you asking me?
It's a terrible expression, rock.
It's a ridiculous.
It's a music writer.
Yeah, whatever. But the point is, it's there. Go and listen to it. It's inescapable. Just go, whatever it was. Paul McCartney, Jet, demixed. You'll find it.
Yeah.
Turn up on YouTube or whatever. So this is the next thing. After having years, spending decades when they tried to perfect records, they're now trying to unperfect them, aren't they?
Yes. Yeah.
They kind of go back. Go back to a raw version. Go back to a less polished version, and then they'll polish it all up again. Or they'll find something to do with it. You can play with this stuff forever.
The Word Podcast. Fix yourself a drink, and it's like being in the pub.
Well, we're joined by birthday guest Kevin Rose. Kevin, very nice to see you. You've had the birthday. It was last week, I think, and it was low key. You were saying.
Yes, yeah. Although, saw some nice friends, but yes, a January birthday in my 1950s, in my 50s is bound to be low key.
Well, we do low key. You're among friends. So, what's your query that you wanted to chuck into the fray? I
recently watched, after the behest of my 15-year-old daughter, Love and Mercy. Finally got around to watching that, the Brian Wilson biopic of sorts, and actually made me think this is actually really good. Most biopics that I've seen are terrible, and I actually generally avoid them. And I wondered actually if there are any that you thought were any good.
I haven't seen Love and Mercy.
No, not that.
Who plays Brian Wilson?
Well, there's two Brians. I think maybe one of the reasons why it's good. Well, there's various reasons why it's good, and I think one is it's about two specific periods of his life.
Right.
One is sort of Pet Sound / Smile, and he's played by Paul Dano. And then there is a period where he meets his now wife, and she tries to extricate him from the clutches of the Doctor,
Eugene Landy.
Played by Paul Giamatti.
God!
Oh, yes, I've heard of this.
I like Paul Giamatti.
The wife
so do I. Very much.
The wife is Elizabeth Banks. So, and he's played by I've forgotten his name now. John Cusack.
Oh, right. Okay.
I think, maybe does that work? But I think the reason why the film works so much is that the attention to detail. So I think if it's one of those things that, because I play the guitar, whenever I see somebody playing the guitar, if it doesn't look authentic, or it's really you just think they haven't bothered at all, then it ruins it in a way. Whereas this, all the musicians, the wrecking crew, and everything like that, they studied the tapes of the recording the Pet Sounds. So all the dialogue feels authentic, even though it's ad-libbed. All the musicians are musicians. They filmed it in the same studio that they filmed it in. So it just feels really authentic. And they switch between sort of like some Super 8 type stuff for certain bits. Mm. And no, it's really...
Well, I shall have to watch it.
I'd love to see. That sounds really, really good.
Did you notice, actually, you mentioned his second wife. She died this week, didn't she?
Oh, I didn't see that.
Yes, she did. She died this week.
Yeah. Because he must be quite fragile now. I worked out that we saw him, telling my daughter that, my wife and I saw him, when he came and did Smile, And that was 2002, I think, wasn't it?
Probably.
Was that the South Bank?
Yeah.
I was there, yes. That was fantastic.
Yeah. It was amazing.
The Wondermints.
But I went with a friend who'd seen the Pet Sounds one. And he said, well, the Pet Sounds one, he was just standing up, really. But so he was a bit more with it, should we say, a bit more mobile at Smile. But another friend who'd seen him like 10 years ago said, he doesn't know why he's doing it. He should retire, really, because he seems very delicate.
So going back to your point about rock biopics, I think they're all worth seeing once. Because the key bit of all rock biopics is when the character walks on and you go, oh, look, there he is, being played by so-and-so.
And it either works or it doesn't.
It either works or it doesn't. Yeah. And even if it's kind of worked, you don't desperately want to go back. I remember, Mark and I went to see the Elvis thing, the Baz Luhrmann Elvis thing, which I think I really enjoyed it. I wouldn't desperately want to see it again because at the time you're sort of overwhelmed by the experience. Oh, yes, he's really good. And that person playing so-and-so, that's really good. But if you had time to think about it, you'd probably go, not so sure, really.
That's a good point. The second time around, it'd probably be less convincing because you just totally bought into it for that one moment.
Yeah,
the second time, you would be standing outside of it saying, this is somebody pretending to be Elvis.
Yeah.
I think Rocket Man's pretty good. I thought Backbeat and Nowhere Boy, the Beatles ones, are pretty good. There are various that are terrible, I think. Walk the Line. I mean, it's not terrible, but it's just uncool and corny.
Yeah.
And I think
I'm wondering whether
the Doors one was shocking, I think.
Which one, sorry?
The Doors. I can't remember. Is it Oliver Stone?
Oliver
Stone,
yeah. Val Kilmer. Feels embarrassingly... Yeah, it just feels embarrassing, that one, I think. If you know less about the subject, I think it may be... So, I mean, there's ones I haven't seen, but I'd be interested to see the Joe Meek story, is it called? Stuff like that. I don't know. Things like, well, I think, that happened, did it? Or that happened,
I tell you what is good is Anton's Joy Division film.
Control, that's very good.
It's a very good film.
Really good. And the band actually play the songs, and they look so like them. It's funny and it's moving. It's a terrific film.
Isn't there a vogue towards that nowadays? Is that the sort of in the same way that you don't have canned laughter in sitcoms, you don't that people try to do the performance themselves?
They do,
I suppose so.
Yeah, well, Reese Witherspoon and Joaquin Phoenix do in Walk the Line, and they're very good, actually. It's just that the actual construction of the story is a bit corny, I think.
Yeah. Well, I shall make a point of watching Love and Mercy on your...
Don't blame me.
No, I won't blame you. I won't blame you. See, you get nervous now.
Blame my daughter.
We'll come looking for you if we don't like it. We know where you live.
Yes. So will everybody listening to this podcast all be off going to watch Love and Mercy tonight and then
moaning about it tomorrow.
Yeah.
But thanks very much for joining us on your birthday and well, say goodbye.
Goodbye.
And that's goodbye from us as well.
Thanks. See you next week.
This podcast was brought to you by The Word.